British spy Melita Norwood helped speed up USSR's atomic bomb program. Melita Norwood, the granny spy who passed Britain's nuclear secrets to the Soviet Union, helped speed up Stalin's atomic bomb program by 5 years, according to a controversial new biography. Norwood, a committed communist who began spying for Moscow in the 1930s, handed over technical information which provided Russian scientists with a crucial breakthrough. Her contribution allowed them to overcome problems which blocked the development of their nuclear reactors and led directly to the USSR exploding its bomb in 1949 years earlier than would otherwise have been the case. The claims are made in a new book, The Spy Who Came In From the Co-op, written by David Burke, a friend of Norwood's who interviewed her extensively in the years leading up to her death in 2005. The author states her contribution to Russia's nuclear bomb program was at least as great as that made by Klaus Fuchs, a member of the Anglo-American nuclear research team who handed over plans to the Russians in the mid-1940s and is considered one of the Soviet Union's most effective spies. Mr. Burke also claims that Norwood recruited a spy in 1967, codenamed Hunt, who continued to work for Moscow until 1981. The revelations will prove highly embarrassing for the government, which sought to play down Norwood's role in press briefings after she was unmasked as a spy in 1999. The briefings were used to justify the government's refusal to prosecute her. Norwood was recruited by the NKVD, the forerunner of the KGB, in 1934 by Andrew Rothstein, one of the founders of the Communist Party of Great Britain, and began actively working for the cause 2 years later. In the mid-1940s, she was working as a secretary to the director of the British Non-Ferrous Metals Research Association, the body which was responsible for Britain's secret atom bomb program. The breakthrough for her and the Russians came when she was given access to research work relating to a theory about the corrosive nature of uranium at high temperatures. Mr. Burke told the Sunday Telegraph the information provided by Melita was invaluable to the Russians and speeded up their nuclear bomb program by 5 years. They had Fuchs designs, but they didn't have the uranium because they couldn't control the uranium inside the reactor, as it was subject to creep and corrosions. Without the reactor, you cannot enrich uranium or extract plutonium. The British team had been working successfully on the same issue since 1941, and this is the material Melita handed to the Russians. In his book, which will be published in October, Mr. Burke says Norwood was groomed for a life in espionage by her highly political mother Gertrude, who also spied for Moscow. In the 1930s, Gertrude set up a safe house for the Soviets' network of radio operators in the UK. The security services were suspicious of Melita's communist sympathies and seemed to have opened a file on her in the 1930s. However, officials failed to take any further action, even when her name was linked to the creation of a spy network at Woolwich Arsenal in 1938. Contrary to official claims that Norwood was effectively rendered inoperable by the British security services in the early 1950s, when details of her work was uncovered, Mr. Burke maintains that she carried on working successful for Moscow until her retirement in the early 1970s. An historian who specializes in Eastern European political émigrés, Mr. Burke first met Norwood in 1997 when he was researching the work of her father Alexander Cernas, a Latvian. He had no idea that Norwood, who lived in South London, was a spy until she was outed on the front pages of newspapers in 1999. She was nicknamed the Bolshevik of Bexley Heath. He said, "I was traveling by coach to see her in 1999 and had to get off at Milton Keynes to change to another bus. I went into the shop to buy a paper and there she was staring out from the front pages. I rang her and she said, 'You better come next week. I have been a rather naughty girl and there are a lot of press at my front door.' When I met her the following week, she was still in a state of shock. She said, 'I thought I'd gotten away with it.'" Mr. Burke added Melita was not a hardline Stalinist. She was an emotional communist and quite naive. She thought what she was doing was for the benefit of the entire world. She thought of Stalin in those early days as a sort of Clement Attlee figure. When she became politically active in the 1930s, Russia was seen by many people as the only nation capable of defeating the Nazis. She once said to me she didn't agree with spying against one's country. She said her purpose had been to keep Russia abreast. However, the book also reveals that Norwood herself recruited at least one spy to work for Russia. She declined to identify her recruit. Mr. Burke says Norwood had little time for the new generation of spies and their working methods, which became Cold War law. She didn't like what she called the Playboy spies. She also had no time for things like honey traps. She believed in doing things the old-fashioned way. Professor Christopher Andrew, the official historian for MI5, who has written the foreword to the new book, said, "There was no doubt that the Russians thought she was a significant operator." Melita was the longest-lasting Soviet spy in British history and that country's most important female operative. How important particular pieces of information is often in the ears of the beholder. But the point is that the Russians thought what she was doing was very important and they told her so. The Spy Who Came In From the Co-op will be published by Boydell and Brewster on 17th October, price PS 18.99.